So now that you guys have your file open, this is just a quick rendering that I did of the same project that you guys are working on, and you can see it's pretty simple. A couple of things that I want you to note when you're starting to put together entourage and things like that is it's really important to understand and pay attention to where the light is coming from, uh, and then also what your perspective is. Okay, so a lot of times your renderings in that will be and should be, I think, to have a decent rendering should be at a level that is kind of eye level, something that people experience. Now that can be different if you're going to kind of go back and make aerial views to kind of look at the whole project and that sort of thing. But in general, you know, keeping it at eye level makes a big difference. So what you want to pay attention to is the horizon line. And we'll see when we start to select entourage and that it's important to understand where that is, because if you are trying to pick out a texture or an entourage piece or that you're going to use, especially like for the ground plane for grass, if you're trying to use something that's being taken from a photograph that's way up high, our brains are going to disconnect and it's not going to look right, and it'll immediately put the project off. So what we want to do is look for textures and trees and things like that that are taken from a similar kind of perspective. And then also we want to pay attention to the light. So in this rendering here, the light, we can tell from the shadows, is coming from behind. So what I don't want to do is find textures and things like that, or trees that have light coming from different directions. It's okay if it's coming from this side, but potentially what I really want to do is try to find something that the shadows and the light that it's coming from is correct. Okay, so what I just did is go to Google and then selected grass field. So a couple of things that I did was I went to the tools and selected larger than 2 megapixels because I wanted to make sure that that the image that I was going to be using was large enough that that it wouldn't look all low res and grainy when we do it. And that's particularly important, especially for stuff that's going to be in the foreground, that's going to be closest to you. You want to make sure that you have a high enough quality that it's going to look all right. So we can see certain candidates. If we come back to here, my horizon line is down at the kind of bottom third of the scene, the window, and it's also, you'll notice that there's a pretty interesting, well, not interesting, but it's a pretty apparent perspective. So there's a lot of attention that's kind of drawing the eye to this direction here. So one of the things that we want to do is understand that, and so the things that we want to look for are maybe images that will have something that is off in the distance here, so trees or something like that that's actually quite smaller. We wouldn't want to necessarily find something that's really huge and up close. We also know that this project in general is on kind of a big field, so you know, trying to think about that as well. And we want, so basically the other thing we want to do is try to make sure that what we find doesn't necessarily draw our attention, because what we want to do is in a way, at the end of the day, try to use this to capture the eye and to stop the eye from just wandering off the page. So those are some of the things that we're going to be looking at. So when I'm looking at this, okay, this is probably, that might be okay to use, but that's probably not perfect. This is too high in terms of its horizon line. This is pretty good in terms of that, but it seems to be a little bit too far away. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm looking back over here and I have some grass here, which is actually pretty up close, so I want to make sure that there's something there. So I'm just kind of looking through here. This one's pretty interesting, except for the wrong, in terms of the feel for the size of grass and stuff, that's right, but the horizon's not working really well. You might be able to make that work, but it's going to be a little bit more difficult. Just kind of continuing to scroll down and look. Too far. This one might be okay, but it's got too much. The sun's coming in the wrong direction, so we don't want to use that. So here's one, but I would say that this isn't a good one because the clouds, we could fix that, but I'm looking at this in terms of horizon. It's right, but that's maybe a little bit too much in the plant. It would take away, because what we want to do is focus on what you want to focus on. We want to focus on the building. Now, if this was all about bringing the landscape forward, we might do something a little bit different. So in the end, this is the image that I found. You'll see that the horizon is a little bit high, but I think I can fix that. It has enough kind of foreground elements that I feel like that's going to be usable. With this, the sky is pretty usable. The direction of the sun is coming from behind, so that's usable. So it's got a lot of things that I can use, but to get the horizon correct, I'm going to have to move this thing down a little bit. So that means that I'm probably going to have to find another sky and kind of map those two into it. So this is going to be a good start for me. So I'm going to download that, and then we'll import that in. Open up my layers, and I'm going to create a new layer. And then I'm also going to duplicate this layer. Duplicate my rendering, because I want to make sure that I can utilize that and always have one that I can go back to. So sometimes if there's a little lock here, you can click that and unlock it. And I'm just right-clicking and duplicate layer. I'm going to name it. I'm going to turn this up. So this is the one that I'm going to start working on. I'm going to File, and we have two options here. We can place embedded or place linked. So when we place a linked file, that means that it's linked to that image, and so it's always going to go back and reference. So it does two things. One is it makes the file a little bit smaller because it's only creating a link to it. And it allows us to go back and replace that, and it works really well. The thing that you have to remember is that if you are going to share this file with somebody else, you have to package all of those links together. So it has to be sent with everything. So you have to almost kind of zip everything together. Otherwise, I'll open it up and it won't link in that file and it won't work. So, but it's a good habit to use the linked. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to go to my textures, and I'm going to use that edge. Place that in there. And so as it's placed in here, to work on it, I might choose multiply so that I can see where it's at in relationship to my horizon line and things of that nature. So that's just by selecting multiply. So now you can see here's my horizon line, here's the horizon line for this. So if I really need to start to bring that down. Get that aligned. And I mean, one thing you could do is stretch this out and make this bigger, and I might not need to replicate the sky. So if I hold down the the Alt key and scroll, I could grab this thing and grab this up here and make it bigger and scroll it down. But what I don't like about that is it makes the trees a little bit too big for what I'm looking for. So I'm going to go back to just making it the width and dragging this down. Now, one thing that you can do also is that when you hold the Shift key and you're moving something around, it will snap to straight lines. So if you just want to move something straight up, hold down the Shift key. If you want to keep it in the same aspect ratio, just use that Shift key. Okay, so once you have it in place, you just hit Enter, and it's locked into place. And go back to my layers and go back to normal. Okay, so the first thing is that we have a problem in terms of it's in the front. So I can drag this below. So now that it's in the background, but you see that now that it's in the background, there's a bunch of stuff that is not working for us in terms of we're going to have to get rid of this around here so that we can start to see that grass come out into the foreground. But there are a couple of things that are really starting to be nice about that texture and those trees in the background. And one of that is that we have this kind of white box, and this darker tree line solidifies that and emphasizes, creates a contrast here, which is going to be nice to keep our eye. The other thing is that this horizon line, this here, along with the angle of this roof, starts to give us some arrows for the eye to come in and then come back into the image. So you always want to kind of think about that of how to draw people's eyes back to where they are using contrast, using color, and using angles of the perspective. Those are all important. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start to layer mask out these areas here so that we can take out areas of the image. And again, I want to do it in such a way that I'm not destroying this image, this main image. So I'm going to do that using layer masks. So right down here is Add Layer Mask under the menu. So it looks like a rectangle with a circle in it. I'm going to select that, and now we have a layer mask. Okay. So one of the things, I'm going to zoom in here. We want to get rid of this kind of green area. So making sure that the layer mask is selected, I can come up over here and look at a couple of different ways, and I'm going to try first, because I have a flat background, it's a single color, I'm going to try the Magic Wand tool. The Magic Wand tool allows you to just select an area that's all of the same color. And if I hold the Shift key down, I can just keep adding to that selection. But there you see that I start to have some problems because the tonal values all start to become an issue there. So I can do Control or Command Z and back up of that. And then I might look at up here these different sample sizes. So right now what it's saying is it's doing an 11 by 11 pixels by 11 pixels, and it's averaging that. So if I want a little tighter tolerance, I might start by going down and saying, no, just give me a 3 by 3 average, and I'll test that out. See, and that's working much better. You can zoom in here. I'll just start to clean this up a little bit. using the Alt and the zoom. And you'll notice that I have some fireflies here that are going to be there. I'm going to fix those a little bit later. So I'm going to come over here. See, now we're starting to see that, okay, I got a big problem there. So I'm going to Control Z just to undo that. And this is where I might turn up my back to the 11 by 11 average. Hold the Shift key down, and that gives a little plus you can see. Okay, that's a little bit better. So that's going to be my first start. And so you'll notice that on the background is white. And what I'm going to do is fill that with black. So I'll do Edit, Fill. And I want that to be black. And so now that we have that layer mask, and it is now giving us our first continuous thing there. Doing Control or Command D gets rid of that, the selection. So I'm going to come back in here, and I know that that right now it's looking, okay, but it's not looking great, right? It looks like this thing is floating over there. So a couple of things that we want to do is adjust the layer mask to let some of that grass pop up in a more natural way along this edge. So we can do that by painting over that layer mask. So taking this layer mask here, making sure that that's selected, and I can go to my paintbrush tool over here on the corner or on the side, and I'm going to look at a different brush. So open up the brushes, which is right up here, and we have a selection of different brushes. Comes with there's some grass. If you scroll down a little bit, there's these grass brushes. So it looks like a single or a triple kind of grass. I'm going to select that. And I'm going to make sure that my foreground color down here is black, because I'm painting in black. And then the thing that I want to do, here's a little quick shortcut, is right now I'm not really seeing how big my grass is. If you use the bracket key, so you have the two bracket keys just to the right of the P, you can use that to size up and size down your grasses. So now you can actually see kind of where we're at. And I want to go to normal. I want this opacity to be 100%, flow 100%. That's fine to get started on. And then what I'm going to do, see that gets too big. So I want to undo, Control Z, and then I want to make this grass smaller. So I'm just using the bracket, which is right next to the P, just to the right of the P, to make it smaller. The one to the right of that one makes it bigger. So I'm going to get it somewhat close to what I'm seeing as the size of the grasses there. And I'm just going to start to paint along here, making sure that I'm painting on the layer mask. And you'll notice that the grass is moving around in different sizes and also in different angles. And what that's doing is it's automatically kind of randomizing what's there. I'm going to make the background black too. So both of them are black. Because what I was noticing was that there was starting to paint some gray. And so this brush, what it was doing was sampling between the background and foreground layers to randomize and change the kind of colors. So if you were actually painting grass, you could have a darker green and a lighter green, and it would randomize between those to make it more believable. But what I want is to use this as a masking tool. So I'm going to make both of those black. So I'm only painting in black so that it's actually masking off this background. And so all I'm going to do is just paint this up. And what I'm doing, is you can see, is that I'm actually kind of covering over that seam where the grass kind of floats, or the concrete kind of floats, so it doesn't look like it's floating anymore. It looks like the grass is kind of up to that edge. And I'm working really on that line in between. So that line in between there, that's what I want to get first. I want to make sure that that gets covered up, and then I can, if I feel like the grass needs to be a little bit taller, I can start to bring it up a little bit. But right now I want to just make sure that that is clean. Again, when you're zooming in and out, that's Alt and scroll, and when I want to kind of pan around, I just hold down the space bar. And so as I'm getting closer to the camera, what I want to do is actually pump up the size of my brush a little bit, because the grasses are going to be taller and more distinct the closer you are to the camera. And then as I work away, I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. I think what I'm going to do is because this grass seems a little bit taller, a little bit more unwieldy, I'm going to put in a couple of places where the grass, and I'm just doing single taps now to kind of make it a little bit more making the So now you can see already that this is really starting to ground that in, and we have a little bit, it becomes a little bit more distinct as we get up closer to the camera. A little further away, it becomes a little less distinct, but we've now kind of created this line so that it doesn't feel like that's floating. It feels a little bit more embedded into the landscape. And it's good, you want to look for variation and make sure that, you know, like here it's a little lower, it gets a little higher. Make it a little bit more natural. So we're going to do the same thing over here, but as we've gotten further away, we need to make that a little bit smaller. The other thing is that we know that we want to keep this line distinct. We don't want this here. So this is where I'm going to come in and actually make another selection. Using the Polygon Tool, and basically what I want to do here is I just want to protect this area here. Okay, so I've just made this selection, and right now, if I was to start painting that mask, it would actually only paint in here, do exactly the opposite of what I want. And so what I want to do is make it so that it paints everywhere but there. So what I do is go up to Select and select Inverse. You don't really see any change, but when I start painting, it will start to work out over here. So go back to the brush. I'm going to make my brush smaller since we're further away from the camera. And I'm just going to, again, start working on this edge over here. Okay, I'm going to do Command or Control D to deselect, and then I'm going to come back over and make another selection with the polygon over here to protect this edge. And then select an inverse, and go back to my paintbrush and make it a little bit smaller again. And just start painting along this edge to work that in. Control D to get rid of things, and then I'm going to just zoom out and take a look. How are we doing there? So for the most part, I think that that's pretty good.